This show is part of the RetroZap.com podcast network.
Have you finally come to save your apes?
I came for you.
For me? My God. Look at your eyes. Almost human. How did you know I was here?
I was told you were coming. That more soldiers from the north would be joining you here.
Joining me?
To finish us off.
Hey, Ape fans! Welcome to Talking Apes TV. This is your Planet of the Apes podcast, where we reintroduce and break down the Planet of the Apes TV series, the live-action series from 1974, and the animated series titled Return to the Planet of the Apes, which aired during the Saturday morning cartoon block on NBC in 1975. I am Richard Wolosky, but when talking about such an Urko-tastic universe, I wouldn't be able to do it alone. Here is my Talking Apes TV co-host, the man who I've argued endlessly with about pigs, vampires, sloppy animation, prolonged and padded scenes, ice mountains, nonsensical wardrobe choices, horse races, and puddles. Here he is, Mr. Mark Ogushowitz. Hey, Mark.
Hey, Rich, you think that covers it all?
You know what? That was the list I could come up with in this short amount of time. We've only had, a couple of years to make this list, and I think I've gotten them all. Did I miss something?
I was waiting for you to miss something, but I think you got them all.
Yeah, I think I did too. So if anyone is new to the show, that's what we've argued about endlessly. Some of those arguments have had endings, and some of them have not.
And some of the ape fans have sided with me, and some of them have sided with you.
Yes. All right, Mark.
Well, before we get started, we should make a small announcement, though, and that is that we have officially finished talking about all the Apes television universes, the live-action and animated series. That is, unless some network or streaming service heard our campaign last show and decided to put out another series.
Netflix.
What about Hulu?
Hulu.
Amazon Prime.
Yeah. NBC, CBS.
Anybody who wants to do it.
Do a stage play. We'll watch it. Put it on TV.
Well, somebody needs to do this because, let's face it, as all the Talking Apes TV fans out there have proven, there is a true hunger for apes on TV.
Oh, there sure is. You know what? Public access. Anything. We'll take it.
But because we have officially discussed all the episodes of all the series that are apes on TV, we are now going to be taking a small hiatus for a while. But I want to be clear about something. The reason I say hiatus is because we aren't planning on going away. One thing is, we will be keeping the Facebook page going so we can keep the Talking Apes community alive. And whenever we find something interesting to talk about, we will come back with a special episode. So maybe at the end of the year, if War of the Planet of the Apes gets some awards nods, we'll do an episode on that. Or when the next movie comes out, maybe we'll do an episode on that.
Or when Titan Books wants to do a volume 2 of Tales from the Forbidden Zone, we'll cover that, since that is the vintage ape era that we've covered.
Yeah, that would be good. Let's hope they come out with another book, because the first book was just awesome.
I'm not saying that I've heard something behind the scenes, but you know what? If they do another volume, we'll be there to cover that.
I just want everybody to remember that we are going to be keeping the Facebook page active because we really do want to keep the Talking Apes TV community alive. So please remember to keep posting pictures, comments, and all that stuff so we can keep in communication with all the apes out there. And the Facebook page will also be the place where we will be announcing any special upcoming episodes of the podcast.
Okay.
Now, with that said, we also want to let everybody know that at the end of our show today, after we have finished recapping the Return to the Planet of the Apes series, we will be going into our reviews of the much-anticipated War for the Planet of the Apes. So please stay tuned for that.
Now, what would a last Talking Apes TV be without a Gary Dubin / Felix Silla update?
And who do we got to thank for this?
We have to thank our good friend Patrick Izzo, who posted a pic on our Talking Apes TV Facebook page of a young Felix Silla, and he's holding a chimpanzee mask and wearing an outfit. Now, the caption that Patrick wrote says, "Too bad Gary Dubin is no longer with us, because I think this picture could put the Gary Dubin-Felix Silla child-ape debate to rest." Now, Mark, let's catch everyone up on this who might be a new listener. Gary Dubin is an actor who says, in quotes, says he was the child gorilla from the original Planet of the Apes movie, the "Look, it's a man," that ape.
Right.
However, there's also another side of it that says Felix Silla played that same, "Hey, look, it's a man," gorilla child.
This has been hot debate on our show. It's like probably the biggest debate. It's really appropriate to talk about this on this particular episode where we're going to be wrapping everything up. Because this Gary Dubin debate is, have we talked about anything else as much as this?
No, not at all. And when we went to an autograph signing, Gary was there and he signed an autograph for me. He charged me $10 for this autograph. But then people started posting pictures on our Facebook page of this gorilla, this young small gorilla with Charlton Heston smoking a cigarette. But this doesn't make any sense. Gary Dubin was supposedly 10 or 11 years old when he shot Planet of the Apes. Now, I don't think anyone's going to let a 10 or 11-year-old smoke a cigarette while shooting a movie. So this is very, very confusing. However, when we reached out to Gary Dubin, he didn't reach back. So what is going on? So now let's cut to present day.
Now we're looking at this picture that Patrick Izzo has posted, and at first it looks like Patrick Izzo may have put the debate to rest, because here's Felix Silla in an ape outfit, and there's the gorilla mask in his lap.
But it's not a gorilla mask that he's holding. It's a chimpanzee mask.
Is that a chimpanzee mask? It could be a young gorilla mask.
No, this is clearly a chimpanzee because he's also wearing that green tunic that the chimps wear.
Right.
So this doesn't, unfortunately, put the debate to rest.
You know something? If you look at the outfit that he's wearing, that's not the outfit that the Look, It's a Man gorilla is wearing in Planet of the Apes. Isn't that an outfit from Battle of the Planet of the Apes?
That's exactly where I was going. This is an outfit seen in Battle for the Planet of the Apes, the only other Apes movie where you see child apes. Then I went to a picture for Battle for the Planet of the Apes. I pulled up a lobby card on the internet, and here is a group of 8 young chimpanzees. It's one of the school scenes. So it looks like that Felix Silla actually played one of these chimpanzees in this scene for Battle for the Planet of the Apes.
I think I got the same picture pulled up right now. Do you think you can tell which one he is?
I think so, because the first 2 apes closest to the camera, those are prosthetics, but if you start looking at the apes further and further down the line, those guys are wearing masks. Now, we know that with each successive Planet of the Apes movie, the budgets got a little smaller, so they were reduced from fully formed prosthetics to just slip-on Don-Post masks. And these apes here, these are some Don-Post masks if I ever saw them. So this all fits in with Felix Silla playing one of these young chimps in Battle for the Planet of the Apes, but who's to say that they didn't bring back Felix Silla for multiple ape roles?
Right, but this picture that Patrick Izzo has posted, I think it's safe to say that this is a picture from behind the scenes of Battle of the Planet of the Apes. So, I'm sorry, Patrick, you said that this picture could put the Gary Dubin Felix Silla child ape debate to rest, but since he's not in the same outfit as the ape child in the original Planet of the Apes movie, I'm not sure the debate has been put to rest.
But Patrick, we see where you're going, and Mark, even you and I were like, oh, this is the perfect picture we're looking for, until we started looking closer and closer, and it's like, hey, wait a minute, that's not a gorilla, that's a chimpanzee. And we did some research, and it all led to Battle for the Planet of the Apes.
But I do want to thank Patrick Izzo for looking out and trying to come to a conclusion to this.
So what does this all mean? We still don't know who the "Look, It's a Man" gorilla was in Planet of the Apes. Now, if we're going out with a bang on this, I'm going to say it was Felix Silla in the costume, because that actor was smoking a cigarette, but yet I do believe it was Gary Dubin doing the voice, because that was a young voice coming out of that small gorilla child. So, voice, it's like Darth Vader, voiced by James Earl Jones, body by David Prowse. Here, the gorilla child, body by Felix Silla, voice by Gary Dubin. Mark, what do you think about that?
It's a good theory, But when we met him, he gave me the impression that he was in that costume. And at this point, I really do want to give him the benefit of the doubt, at least until we find some definitive proof that says otherwise, because before he passed on, he did a lot of signings, and if he wasn't the child ape, then I feel like someone would have called him out by now.
But James Earl Jones will sign a Darth Vader still as James Earl Jones.
That is true. You got a point there.
Yeah, so he doesn't necessarily have to point out voiced by James Earl Jones. So he was Darth Vader, just like Gary Dubin could be right in saying that he was the child gorilla.
Well, like I said, it's a good theory. It could be correct. I think there's only one way we're ever going to get an answer, and we got to get in touch with Felix Silla. You know, I'm going to Comic-Con this year. I don't know if he's going to be there, but I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out.
Yeah, we've got to get to the bottom of this, and when we do get Felix Silla cornered, we're going to have our microphones ready, and that's when we're going to do a special Talking Apes TV episode to come out of our hiatus. What do you think?
It'll be like a 10-second episode where I'm like, okay, can you say that you were the child gorilla in Planet of the Apes?
And why is all this happening?
You know, the answer that I would love to hear, I really would love to hear, because I really want Gary Dubin to be that character. I would really love to hear Felix Silla say, I got in costume as an ape on Battle of the Planet of the Apes. Gary Dubin, I believe, was the guy who did that role. I would love for him to say that.
Then you know what? Then Fox has got a lot to answer for if they're giving a young Gary Dubin cigarettes. Guy's holding a Marlboro while he's filming the scene. Come on! That's not right to do to a child. I don't care what decade you're in.
If we find out that it was Gary Dubin, that'll be the next question we'll have to have answered. Why does he have a cigarette?
Now, let's talk about this, The Unknown Ape, which is a short story in the Planet of the Apes Tales from the Forbidden Zone book.
Right, and this is actually a really good story from the book Tales from the Forbidden Zone to talk about on this particular episode of Talking Apes TV, because we're going to be wrapping up the animated series Return to the Planet of the Apes, and The Unknown Ape is the only story in this book that takes place in the animated timeline.
I was kind of waiting until we finished the series to talk about this particular story because I was just so thrilled. So thrilled that we're going to continue the storyline from the animated series. Will this be the ending? Well, maybe yes, maybe no.
Well, it kind of is. And when you're saying, is this the ending, I'm assuming you're referring to the fact that, as we discussed in the last episode regarding how the animated series ends, the fact that it ends by leaving us hanging and not giving us some very much needed conclusions? Well, in a non-spoilery way, I would like to say that the short story does kind of wrap up the series, and actually, in a really interesting way, it also maybe wraps up the Classic Apes universe as well. I mean, it is missing one key thing that I know we're going to talk about a little bit later on in the episode, but other than that, I do think that it does give us some closure. And along with this closure, it also ends in a way that leaves us room for some more stories if the next volume of Tales from the Forbidden Zone wants to give us more.
Now, this story, The Unknown Ape, was written by Andrew EC Gaska. Now, Mark, what I really loved about this story was that it combined storylines and characters from all of the Planet of the Apes timelines, meaning the films and the TV shows. So this is a mashup of all mashups.
Right, and it also explains the timeline that a lot of people have been questioning of the Planet of the Apes, because a lot of people have been trying to put it in an order where it's just one timeline, but because there's all these time travel elements in the Planet of the Apes universe already, this story kind of goes in the same direction of like the Star Trek reboots. And it takes into consideration that there are many timelines. And maybe there was one timeline, and then Zira and Cornelius went back in time in Escape from the Planet of the Apes, and that started another timeline.
Right.
They actually call it something in the short story. They say another lane in the time highway. And so basically on this highway, the timeline that you would be in would be determined by which lane you are in. And I know that this can all start to sound, kind of confusing, especially to, jam all these different timelines into one short story. But trust me, the author did a really good job putting this together, and it all makes complete sense in the scheme of things. And I don't want to say any more about it, because at this point, I feel like will take away from some of the discovery the person might have while reading it.
But basically what the story is about is that Urko and his army, they find a warhead. And this is all Urko needs to fire at the humanoids. So he is going to try to launch this thing, blow up the humanoids, and all will be good in the world of Urko. So, do you think it works out for Urko? Not going to say, but it's Urko, so when one small thing goes wrong, he goes into another terror spiral. So no one around him will be safe. You know what? That's all we'll say about the actual plot. Urko finally realizes he has a way to kill every single humanoid.
Right. I found this story really interesting. I absolutely loved this story, and it's very strange because with all the timeline aspects and all the different characters coming in, it could have been a total mess, but the author handles it really well. And right at the beginning, it effectively combines all the Planet of the Apes universes because we get the animated Urko, and it's definitely in the animated timeline.
Well, they actually describe his outfit, his orange outfit, whereas the army soldiers are wearing the green outfits, and they did that purposely just so we can get a visual of the animated characters.
Right. So as I was saying, we're very obviously in the animated world, and we start off with Urko and his men. They're in the cave underneath the Forbidden Zone where the missile from Beneath the Planet of the Apes is. I'm convinced that that's the same missile from Beneath the Planet of the Apes. And who's there with Urko? But Zako from the live-action TV series.
I'm loving this. I am loving this.
And then this army busts in to try and stop Urko, and it consists of Virgil and McDonald from Battle of the Planet of the Apes, Alan from the live-action TV series, and Brent and Jeff from the animated series. And you start reading this, you're like, what? What's going on here? But this is freaking awesome. There's something awesome about it, but it makes no sense. But trust me, by the time you get to the end of the story, it all makes perfect sense.
Austin Stoker must really love this story. Yeah, I get 2 characters in this short story. Awesome.
But at first you see all of these characters coming in, and then you start to realize who the Unknown Ape is in the title. Caesar makes an appearance.
Yeah, but let's make it clear that it's the Roddy McDowell Caesar.
That's the only thing that this story may have an issue with, is the fact that we have these new movies out, and this story was obviously written before the guy saw War of the Planet of the Apes. It does have a conflict with the way that the new movies go. I don't know if it would be possible to fit those new movies into this world because of something that happens that I don't want to give away.
Well, they were really aiming for the vintage classic apes. So anyone reading this book, this short story, The Unknown Ape, is wedged in right in the middle of the book. So if you've gotten this far, it's pretty clear that these are all vintage apes.
Right, and I'm actually conflicted about how I feel about that because as much as I love the fact that they stay only with the vintage and they kind of ignore the reboots, because of the way they're mixing all the versions, the original movies, the 2 TV series and all that into this story, it would have been really cool if they could have found a way to mix the new reboots in.
Would have been funny had Judy said to a character, "You look a lot like Mark Wahlberg."
No, we could leave that one out.
But, just to get them all in there. But, speaking of Judy, how much fun was it to read a sentence that contained Alan from the live action, Judy from the animated show, and Caesar from the films? I was going nuts with that, with those sentences.
Yeah, no, that was actually pretty cool. I just loved seeing all these characters together in the same story.
Now, I don't think we're giving anything away by saying that there is an absence of specific characters. Pete? Nowhere to be seen. He's out there looking for his own backstory again. And Galen. Alan does mention all these friends he's had. He does mention Galen and Pete, but there's no mention of where these friends are.
But there's also somebody else missing, and that's Bill.
Yeah, right.
Now, Bill's absence is actually explained, and I'm not going to give that away here because some of the best things in the story are the brave little twists that the author explores, but I do want to know why Pete's not here. Why didn't Alan bring him along when he traveled to this timeline?
You know what? Okay, maybe if we can ever get Andrew EC Gaska on the show, we can ask him these questions, because I would like to have him on so we can talk through this short story, because there's a lot of questions here.
You know what he's going to say, don't you? Well, that character had no dimension because he had no backstory.
All right, then, answer for Galen, then.
Right.
Galen had backstory. He had parents. He had a last name. He had everything.
Right. He's not in this story. Like we said, Bill's not in this story. The one thing that's not in this story, though, that I still really did want, though, and how do I put this? When I first found out that there was a story in the book that was about the animated series, got real excited. And I said to myself, I wasn't going to read it until we were done with the animated series, though, because it might give something away or something. Then when the animated series ended, and it didn't give us any of the conclusions that we wanted, as we talked about in our previous episode, I'm like, well, that's okay, because there's a story in the book, and it's going to give us answers to everything. And the only thing that's really missing for me is I still want to see that scene where they take the book that they retrieve from Ice Mountain in the Battle of the Titans episode to the Council. Remember in the Battle of the Titans episode, which was the last episode, Cornelius and Bill, they go up to Ice Mountain and they get that book.
A trip to the zoo.
They get that book, A Trip to the Zoo, that reveals that at one time humans were as smart as apes and might have actually been smarter than apes. And they feel like if they bring that book to the council, that's going to change the council's mind about humans and bring peace. And I don't see how that's possible. We talked about it in the last episode because Battle of the Titans didn't give us that scene, just kind of left us hanging. And I want to see that scene. And at first, when I saw, the army come in to counter Urko, and it was filled with apes and humans, and they had a little bit of help from the underdwellers, I thought, well, it's because they brought the book. Why didn't we get that scene? I would have liked to have seen that scene. But as you get further into the story, you realize that the reason they bond together has nothing to do with the book being revealed to the council, which means the story, I think, is maybe ignoring it, and I still want that answer. And so when I went to read this short story and I didn't get that answer, I was slightly disappointed that I didn't get that scene. I really, really wanted that scene. I really was hoping for it.
I know on the episode where we had Jim Beard and Rich Hanley, the authors / editors for Tales from the Forbidden Zone, we pitched some ideas to them, which they kind of liked. So if there is a volume 2, Mark, maybe you and I can jump in and we can write that ending. What do you think?
I'm all for it. You think they'll let us do it?
I don't know. They like some of the ideas.
So as they're out there talking with these really well-known authors, they're going to then say, but for this story, we want these 2 unpublished guys to write it.
But you know what? They do a great podcast. No one knows these vintage apes like these guys.
Right. Well, now, like I was saying earlier, I really feel like this short story gives us a good conclusion. It doesn't tie everything up, but it leaves everything in a place where I'm pretty happy that I have a conclusion to the Return to the Planet of the Apes series, with the exception of not getting that one scene.
Right.
Let me ask you one more question. When Alan refers back to Sally, his wife, Chris, his child, Pete and Galen. Now, I know who they are, but also in that sentence, it also says Jonesy.
Yeah, you know what? I did do some research on that. Guess what I found out?
What'd you find out?
Nothing. Not a thing. Not a thing came up.
I thought maybe up in space they ran into the Nostromos and they got the cat from Aliens.
Yeah, oh! That's where I was going to go. That is where I was going to go with this. Very well said.
I mean, that would be a great, mashup graphic novel is, Alien meets Planet of the Apes, so who knows?
Just to make that one sentence make sense to all the ape fans and alien fans out there. With that, let's let the ape fans out there enjoy the story with everything that we had just said and move on to the Return to the Planet of the Apes series wrap-up. Mark, we did it! We just covered the entire season/series of 13 episodes of Return to the Planet of the Apes. Unfortunately, this is where it ends for Planet of the Apes on TV. For now.
Boo-hoo.
Remember, hashtag Planet of the Apes on Netflix.
Or Hulu,
that's right.
Or Amazon. Let's put it out there to everyone.
Once again, public access, we'll take it. So with that, let's recap this animated series with highs and lows and personal favorites. But first, let's give a recap of this series, which ran from September 6th to November 29th, 1975 on NBC. If you're new to the show, if you're new to this series, Return to the Planet of the Apes, let us give you a little background on this whole arc of the show. Now, it centers around a different timeline than in the Apes universe, such as the movies and the live-action show. And if you're keeping track, this series takes place in 3979 AD, whereas the live-action show took place in 3085. And the film, which took place in 3978. Now, those years don't really mean much, if anything, because time travel just erases all of that.
And as we learned in the short story we just talked about, Unknown Ape, it's just new timelines. They don't have to work in a straight timeline anymore.
And that's the only way to make sense of all of the timelines. Because I know, Mark, in the beginning we were like, wait a minute, where's this person? Where's that person? This doesn't coincide with this or with that. But now we know that it's all different lanes in the Ape Highway.
And I would like to thank Andrew EC Gaska for clarifying that with his story, because now we don't have to have this discussion anymore. We can just say, nope, go to the Unknown Ape story. It's all right there.
All right, now this timeline in the animated series features 3 new astronauts, Jeff, Judy, and Bill, who are always trying to stay one step ahead of Urko and his army. And like Taylor in the original film, it is Bill, now dubbed Blue Eyes by Zira, who befriends Cornelius and Zira when they learn that he is no ordinary humanoid. And there are certain parallels to the films, such as the characters Cornelius, Zira, Zaius, Nova, and to a certain extent Brent from Beneath the Planet of the Apes, only here he's named Ron, and then Brent, and then finally Ron Brent. Now, the mutants from Beneath the Planet of the Apes have been repurposed into the Underdwellers in the animated series, who were forced to live underground by the apes. There are only a few references from the TV show, which are Urko, who bears no character resemblance to the TV show Urko, and Zaius. Yeah, you know what? That's close enough. He's Zaius in the live-action, Zaius here in the animated show. I'd say he's about the same character. Now, another resemblance to the live-action series, Mark? What is that? It has no ending. Now, what would have made an acceptable ending to you? I know we just threw it out there with the Unknown Ape story, but let's say Fox came to you and said, Mark, we need something. How can we end this series on an acceptable level? What would you say?
If Fox were to come to me, well, first of all, I might tell them to read the Unknown Ape story. But I don't know if that would fly. The only thing that I feel like I needed was to get a couple of loose ends wrapped up a little better. Find out how the scene with the council, seeing the book retrieved in Battle of the Titans that was discovered in Terra on Ice Mountain. I want to see that scene after the book is retrieved and they bring that book to the council. I want to see that played out. Because as we discussed in our last episode, I still don't understand what was going to happen there, how bringing this book to the council was going to make things better as opposed to making them worse. And also, I wanted to see a little bit more resolution with Urko. I feel like he was kind of left hanging. If you had resolved those 2 issues, yeah, I still want more, but at least I would have been happy with that. Now, I know that there's probably a lot of listeners out there who are going to be thinking or commenting, well, what about getting the astronauts back home, getting them back to their time? But to be honest with you, I'm not necessarily sure that I would have been happy with that. I think that the story isn't about getting them home. It's about them having to learn to accept where they are. And I think that's true of all the apes universes, the movies, the live action series, and the animated series. I'm not necessarily sure going home would have satisfied me. It would have felt too cliche. It would have been too obvious, too easy, too Hollywood, too happy. Whereas I like my characters to kind of go through changes and have to learn something. And so before I would send them home, I would do a storyline where they have to accept where they are and kind of grow happy where they are, because they make friends and they meet apes and other humans that they can relate to and grow to create like new families with these characters.
Right.
That makes sense?
Oh, perfectly, yeah. For me, if NBC or Fox came to me and said, Rich, what can we do? I would say, you know what? You threw away Nova in this whole series. Let's have her find the disc that Alan had in the live action show, and it's she who brings together all these timelines. The disc, meaning the disc that has all the information about where they are. The disc that came from Alan and Pete's spaceship that knows where they started and where they ended up. So I want to see her find that disc and find a computer somehow, not sure where, not sure how, but it ties everything together from the live action show to this show. I know we're thinking of a bigger show here, but I want to see the scope go a little bit bigger.
So how would that work though, since Nova's not in the live action, she's in the animated, and Alan and the disc aren't in the animated, they're in the live action. So how would she find the disc, since they would also be in probably totally different locations?
You know what? That's up to Fox to figure out. I just want to see the two TV series coexist. That way it'll give us more to talk about in the future. I mean, you know what? I'm being selfish. I'm thinking about ourselves. We need something else to talk about.
Well, you're thinking of all the Ape fans, though, so that's not selfish.
Yeah, let's go with that. We're thinking about everybody. So I want Nova to find that disc, the one that Alan just left hanging at like episode 4 from the live action show. You know what? I was just trying to give Nova a reason for being in the series as a whole. All right, now, Mark, within the whole series, Return to the Planet of the Apes, let's get into our favorites. What was your favorite episode in this series and why?
Okay, so this is going to be a controversial answer.
It always is with you.
Because my favorite episode is the first 2 episodes, because I feel they work as one episode. And I think that if the show had continued with the quality of those first 2 episodes, it would have stayed on the air much longer. And the best way for me to explain why I put these together as one episode is, if you remember in our last episode when we were talking about Battle of the Titans, I talked about how that felt like 2 episodes that was cut down to fit into one 20-minute episode, and how things seemed to be resolved too easily. They didn't give us enough time to explore anything, and it just didn't work. Well, if you watch the first 2 episodes, they're much slower paced. They got a much more even pace to them. We get a lot of time in that desert as Bill, Judy, and Jeff are exploring, and they really allow everything to breathe because they allow the story to go over 2 episodes. We get to learn a lot about who these characters are, what the situation is, who Cornelius and Zira are, who Urko is, who Zaius is, and it really sets the universe up really strong because they're not rushing through it the way they did with Battle of the Titans. They're really just kind of taking their time and saying, hey, let's just tell the story. Added to that, the beginning is very reminiscent of the original Planet of the Apes movie where they're crossing the desert, and I like that. The artwork, especially in the desert stuff, is incredible. I really feel like visually, because of the artwork, it was a really great animated series to watch, especially considering how this kind of animation was working at that time. Most of the stuff on the air looked like the later episodes of Return to the Planet of the Apes, so these first 2 episodes really stood out to me.
Okay.
And even though there were still some issues that we brought up, like Jeff really doesn't help Bill out of the situation he gets into at the end of the first episode that continues into the second episode. The stuff with Bill is pretty exciting, and I love the relationships that are being built. I really feel like those first 2 episodes, they could stand on their own. Yeah, there's not an ultimate conclusion of the series, but there's definitely a full story there. And if I revisit the Return of the Planet of the Apes series, those 2 episodes are the 2 that I would probably revisit the most.
All right. Now, when I went through the list, trying to figure out for myself, I did go to that first episode because of the same reason that you just said. It really harkened back to the original Planet of the Apes episode with the 3 astronauts going through the desert. And I love the artwork. I love the montage of stills when they had the storm. I thought, oh, this is going to be a really fun series to get back into because it really harkens back to the 70s. And it was like a stamp on that time period. And I love that kind of thing. However, as I went down the list, I gotta say, my favorite episode overall is Screaming Wings. I love this episode because this is where you first see Urko's descent into madness with his quest for having this plane that they found in his army. And we really get to see his character go from crazy to just friggin' nuts. And whenever you have character development, even like this, I just love that. And I recall all the fun we had talking about how the plane didn't have any artillery. It just had a net to drop. Not 2 nets, but 1 net. So when it dropped the net on its victim, it had to go all the way back to where it came from, load it up with another net, come right back and do it again. If they missed, Well, that's like 2 hours wasted out of their lives. And I really recall having a good time talking about this episode. So, Screaming Wings is my favorite Return of the Planet of the Apes episode.
Screaming Wings was a good one, too. I remember liking that episode, too.
All right, now, what was your least favorite episode?
Do I really got to talk about it?
Say the horse race. Say the horse race.
No, this episode of Return of the Planet of the Apes is worse than the horse race was for the live action.
Bite your tongue. Bite your tongue.
And it was Terror on Ice Mountain. You know, there were a couple of really bad episodes, and I feel like as the show wound down, things felt like the producers were now all of a sudden rushing through everything, and they didn't care anymore, because I personally felt like they must have known they were going off the air. But as bad as all those episodes got, I mean, we had episodes like Invasion of the Underdwellers, which I just did not like either, because so much of it didn't make sense. But as much as I was trying to see if there was something that wasn't as bad as Terror on Ice Mountain, I just couldn't come up with it. Every time I think back, it's the one episode that I never need to see again. This episode, like the last one, Battle of the Titans, it moves too fast, and it just doesn't work. The beginning flies by so quickly. The setup with the book and the discovery of the balloon blueprints goes by so fast that we never get a chance to settle into the story or even care about the story. It's just like, here's information, let's keep moving. But the difference between Terror on Ice Mountain and Battle of the Titans, which had the same problem, is Terror on Ice Mountain didn't have to do that. Because between commercial breaks 1 and 2, there are so many padded shots of the balloon struggling through a storm.
I was going to bring that up. You said it's a show that moves too fast, but I'm thinking about all those padded shots. But yeah, now that you bring it up, between those commercial breaks.
Right, so between commercial breaks 1 and 2, that kind of doesn't move too fast, because 90% of it is just shots of the balloon battling the storm, the balloon battling the storm. And because we spend so much wasted time there, it's actually the stuff before the first commercial break and after the second commercial break that is forced to speed by. But if they literally cut 90% of those padded shots out, they could have given us more time to explore the rest of the show. We could have had more exploration at the beginning when it came to the idea of the book that Cornelius found, the book that reveals that humans were at one time more intelligent than apes. We could have explored the idea of the building of the balloon while using blueprints designed by humans as opposed to apes, when apes could never seem to get a flying balloon to work. We could have also, at the end, explored the idea of when they get up to the top of Ice Mountain and they meet Fu Manchu Ape, and we have the whole scene with Kygor. We could have explored a lot more of that if we had had more time. Well, we could have had more time if they had cut 100 million padded shots out of the stuff between the 2 commercial breaks.
I think that was the episode that had the longest padded shot on record of being 42 seconds of the balloon floating up into the sky. 42 seconds for one shot.
Right, if they had cut that down to 5 seconds, they would have had 37 seconds to devote to Kygor. And then when Kygor finally comes alive to save the day, because if you remember, the gorillas get to the top of the mountain before Fu Manchu Ape, Bill, and Cornelius. And Bill and Cornelius, they're in that tram, and one of the apes starts hacking at the tram cable in order to, cause the tram to crash. Well, we could have maybe spent some more time on Kygor coming to life and having some sort of battle with the apes. But what happens here? I mean, it's just so stupid. Kygor comes to life, he reaches down with one single swat, and he knocks the gorillas down the mountain, and they're defeated.
I was on the edge of my seat.
Oh my god, it was so silly. And here's the thing, this is a kid's show. You're gonna put a big monster in it. Give him more than 10 seconds of screen time.
Do you know how hard it is to animate Kygor?
Excuses. I want more than 10 seconds of my big monster.
Oh, here.
Yeah, exactly. So, how can you defend the show?
I'm not defending that. I'm just saying.
And then as you're watching this episode, you'll notice there's no attention to detail. They go up into below zero weather, and Bill is only wearing a t-shirt. And then if you remember, Cornelius, who is not only wearing a coat of fur because he's an ape, he's also wearing a jacket. And he's the one at one point who can't go any further. And Bill has to carry Cornelius on his shoulders to keep moving forward when he should be the one who's collapsed from frostbite.
So, Mark, stop beating around the bush. What is your least favorite episode? Get to the point.
I could go on and on. You know, we have an episode devoted to the show. Instead of me being, the negative person on this episode, let me just end it there. There's 100 things I could tell you that I didn't like about this episode.
So we're pretty clear. Mark Ogushowitz does not like Terror on Ice Mountain and the horse race from the live action show. All right, we got it.
So let's go here. Now with your least favorite episode, go ahead, top that.
Unearthly Prophecy. Wait, what? What are you talking about, Rich? That was a great episode. Hold on, let me get to the point.
Unearthly Prophecy was a good episode.
This is where we get to meet the Underdwellers. All right, I like these characters. I like Kraydor,
right?
The leader of the Underdwellers,
right?
But the ending kills it. Do you recall the ending to this episode? That never pays off, no pun intended. We fade out on a parking meter after the time expired flag goes up. Now what? That just killed me. If you're gonna set something up like that, at least pay it off somewhere else. And I do remember going, oh, that just killed that whole episode. Why did they end the shot and the episode on a parking meter and how the flag goes up, time expired, fade out like it's a Twilight Zone?
Right. And I remember we talked about this on that episode, that we were hoping that would mean something, because it just seemed like they were pointing to that expired sign for some reason. They climb up, they escape from the Underdwellers, and they're walking through the cave. The camera literally, it doesn't just go to the parking meter, it zooms in on the parking meter, which is buried in the ground, and then that expired flag comes up. And I was expecting that to lead somewhere too.
Now, Terror on Ice Mountain, I like that because it was fun. These shows that are badly animated, budget constraints, I don't care about that. If I'm having fun with it, great. That's all that matters. But if you're going to have something like this, at least have it mean something. Have that be a callback.
Wait a minute, because I want to be clear. This thing that you're having a problem with, which literally is the very last thing in the episode, if you were to shut the episode off 10 seconds before that happened, you would be perfectly happy with the episode, right?
Extremely.
So there's one thing that's wrong. I just listed a whole laundry list of things for Terror on Ice Mountain.
But that's why I say it's my least favorite. See, but that's the difference between you and me, because I had fun with this series. I had fun talking about it. It wasn't perfect by any means, but still, you know what? When I look back, I had fun with it. But when I tried to do something that never paid off, then that's when I had a problem.
I don't know what you mean by the difference between you and me, because I had a lot of fun with this series as well. But let's go a different way with this particular episode, because I had a lot of fun with the Unearthly Prophecy episode. I liked a lot of the things that were revealed about it. I liked all the USA stuff. And yeah, we discussed some issues that we had, as we do with all of them. But ultimately, I thought it had a lot of great reveals. I thought it moved the story forward. I agree with the parking meter thing. But is that really worse than the ending of Battle of the Titans, where they literally talk about something they're going to do for the whole entire episode, and then they never do it, and we're never, ever going to get to see it?
Yeah, because I had fun with it. If you noticed, Terror on Ice Mountain, you had listed all of this list of grievances, which I didn't care about. Bill had a t-shirt. I didn't care about that. I was having fun with it. But something like this, to me, it killed it, because it was trying to do something that never paid off.
So we all have our difference of opinions. I'm not understanding. I really like Unearthly Prophecy, so I'm really surprised to see that at the bottom of your list. That's kind of more towards the top of my list.
Well, there are some times when you watch a movie or a TV show, it's like, well, you know what, this is so far from perfect. I'm going to turn off my head and just enjoy it. That's what this series was all about, just turning off your head and just enjoying it. But when it came to that parking meter, time expired flag, I thought, all right, we didn't need to go there. All right, Mark, we all have our opinions. So with that, let's move on to something more fun, like guilty pleasures. Now, what was your guilty pleasure of the series?
Well, to me, there really is only one answer to this, and that's the I'm Going Humanoid Over You song.
Never thought that I'd be acting humanoid. That ain't some you thing to do. Humanoids go frantic when the poor things get romantic. Now I'm going humanoid over you.
I mean, listen to that. What else could be considered a guilty pleasure outside of that?
Well, you know what? That is the definitive answer for a guilty pleasure.
What about you?
I'm going to say The Monsters. The Monsters was my guilty pleasure of this whole series. I loved Kygor from Terror on Ice Mountain. I loved the spider in Tunnel of Fear, the screeching dragon bird thing from Attack from the Clouds. I loved every time we saw a big monster. And this should have been something that they had rolled in, that they could have rolled into each episode, because I do recall at that age, I love me some big monsters, Godzillas and King Kongs. So I think seeing these creatures in the show harkened back to that age where I just got all giddy when I saw a big rampaging beast.
I just wish they had done some more interesting things with the monsters, especially Kygor, but in reality, you definitely can't go wrong sticking monsters into a kid's animated show.
I had something else to mention as a guilty pleasure, as an honorable mention. And you know where this is going to go, don't you? The insertion of the word ape into pop culture and names, namely William Apespeare. I loved it.
Oh, no, you didn't just say that.
They don't have William Shakespeare in Ape City. That wouldn't make any sense. They have William Apespeare. Loved it.
No.
The Ape Father. Oh my god, the Academy Ape Award. Oh my goodness, that's good stuff. Mark, come on. That is a guilty pleasure. Do you agree? Come on, just say yes.
No. Well, it is a guilty pleasure for you.
I liked whenever we came across a name like that. Good stuff.
If you say so.
Yeah. All right, with that, let's now move on to, Mark, this is the best controversial moment between you and I. We had a lot of arguments. We had a lot of arguments these last 13 episodes. Now, sometimes you thought you were right. Sometimes I thought I was right. And we let the apes out there be the deciding factor. But, Mark, which of these controversial moments, let's say rousing arguments that you had to cut most of it out, which one was your favorite?
You mean all those things you listed at the beginning of the show?
Yeah. You know what? Dealer's choice.
Oh, man. I can't name one, but I can name a couple and just kind of group them as one. And that would be all the times you really got mad at me. Because we had a lot of disagreements, and that was fine. But then there were times that you seemed to get really mad at me for some reason, and I didn't understand why you were getting so defensive and why you would literally start screaming at me. For example, if you go back to the puddle argument, you would think that I did something wrong to you.
And this is from the Mission of Mercy episode. Or was it a puddle? Was it a lake? Was it a lagoon? What was it?
Right. But we would get into arguments about just all sorts of stuff, and you would just get really, really angry defending it to me. And, literally, while I was editing the show, I'd have to lower your volume 18 dB so it didn't blow out people's ears.
I just don't understand why you couldn't see my point of view, okay? It was a puddle. It was a puddle.
And, the weird thing is in those moments, as aggravating as they were in the moment, when I look back at the show and I re-listen to the show, they're some of my favorite moments in the show, because once they're done happening and once I'm done cutting them in half, because I don't think that the audience needs to have their ears blown, I feel like they turned out to be fun moments in the long run. I would hope the listeners had fun with it, because when I listen back to them now, I think they're kind of funny and I think they're kind of fun.
Yeah.
At the time, I was kind of like, Rich, it's a puddle, and stop yelling at me, because you would really like I did something wrong to you. You were yelling at me.
At one point, the neighbors had to come on over and ask what was going on. Are you recording with Mark again? Is that why you're yelling so loud?
Those are my favorite controversial moments, because as much as they were aggravating at the time, and I'm sure I aggravated you at some point too.
No.
When you look back at the show, for listeners, I'm sure they're just really fun moments. And even now, reflecting back at them, I laugh at it now. So that's why I think they're probably my favorite moments. So what was your most controversial moment between us?
Now, all comes down to pigs and vampire controversial moment. I wouldn't even say moment, like a half hour worth of us arguing. Here was a shot of all of these apes looking down on Ape City at a parade. And you would think that they're all apes, but some of those apes look like pigs. Some look like vampires. Some look like, frogs? Bears? And you just couldn't see it. And I just couldn't understand why you couldn't see that these apes, they weren't apes, come on. The artists were having fun. They drew them like pigs. They drew them like vampires.
I want to bring this up. When we had that argument about the bears and the vampires, we brought your wife into your office and asked her what she saw, and she agreed with me and said apes. Do you want me to tell your wife that you told all the ape fans that she was wrong?
I didn't say she was wrong. I said that you were wrong.
But she agreed with me.
Well, you know what? We can all be wrong at one point in our life.
Right.
So that was a pretty heavy argument, which I'm sure if we could unearth those raw footage of us, it went on for like an hour. Just me trying to convince you. Mark, look at the third of the frame to the left and halfway down. That's a friggin' vampire.
Do you really want to get into this argument again?
Yes, I do. All right? We'll put the show on hold and
Do
we'll...
you think the audience wants to hear it again?
Okay, you got a point there. But let's have this argument about the tattered outfit of Urko's witness in Invasion of the Underdwellers.
I stand by that argument.
Boy, we had a good time with this one. And this was when Urko was trying to convince the jury, the council, that it was the Underdwellers who had been stealing everyone's property. He had a plant of a witness come in and say whatever.
He was saying that he was out in the Forbidden Zone and he got attacked by the Underdwellers. And my problem was that he was all in tatters and everything, and he had like a sling on.
And a sling and a broken leg and a wheelchair and a gurney.
Yeah, but see, here's the thing. None of that bothered me, because if you were coming from the hospital, you would have a sling and the bandages and all that. What bothered me is, didn't they give him any decent clothes to wear? They like, okay, well, we're done with you here at the hospital. Here's all your tattered clothes. It's time for you to go to court and look good. So put on all these tattered clothes. And you had brought up something like, oh, we've seen this in shows before. And we have. But generally, the person's got a neck brace on and they got bandages on. But when they're in a court of law, they still have a suit and tie on. This guy looks like he was just beat up. They threw a sling around his arm and put some bandages on him and didn't care about cleaning him up at all. That made him look suspect to me. And that bothered me. And I stand by this argument.
All I'm saying is, he needed a visual. He was attacked. If he came in a suit, he wouldn't have sold it as much as that outfit that he wore. That was one of my favorite controversial moments between you and I, when we just couldn't agree on that tattered outfit of Urko's witness.
Let me get to this question. Would you recommend this series as a whole to people?
Are you talking about Ape fans or just Joe Public?
Joe Public, because I would hope if they're not Ape fans, it's because they maybe haven't seen anything Apes.
If they're not Planet of the Apes fans, no, I would never, ever recommend this series. Just because this series is not meant for anyone else but Ape fans. I don't think audiences, after watching things like the Clone Wars or Rebels, they're going to look at this animation for more than 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, so non-Ape fans, you would not recommend this series to, and I actually 100% get what you're saying. I think that the only way you're really going to enjoy the show is if you're an Ape fan. I think that you'll relate to the characters more and you're bringing more into it. And I think that somebody who watches this as their first experience with apes, I'm not saying that they wouldn't like it, but I think they'll have a tougher time with it.
Exactly. And if you're an Ape fan and you know that this is a sign of the times in 1975, you just run with it. They had a small budget, a small time frame to produce each episode. You get what you can and you just move on with it.
So ultimately, you would recommend the series as a whole to Planet of the Apes fans?
With an asterisk. Asterisk of, this is not like the films, not like the TV show. It's meant for a 7-year-old audience that's not really paying attention.
The reason that I asked if you would recommend the series as a whole, I was very specific as a whole, is because I put a lot of thought into whether I would recommend this series as a whole to people. And I would not recommend the series as a whole to anybody. But here's the thing. I would recommend certain episodes. If somebody came to me and said, is the Return to the Planet of the Apes series any good? Should I watch it? I would probably say, look, I'm a big Planet of the Apes fan. I would definitely recommend it to you, but only certain episodes. And then I would say stuff like, watch the first 2 episodes. I would then watch The Unearthly Prophecy because it figures into Judy's fate, and I also really enjoy that. And I'd probably give them a list of ones that I think they should watch. But ultimately, what killed it for me was not only the episode Terror on Ice Mountain, which you'd have to watch if you watch it as a whole, because that book is so important to the story as a whole. So I would have to doom you to that. But the way that the series ends makes me not want to recommend it to people, because I don't want them to get into something and then not be given any conclusions.
I think they would take it for what it is.
Well, you can watch the first 2 episodes, and I think you can walk away from that and not really be all that worried about the fact that you didn't have any conclusions, because you did have a full story in there. And if you watch The Unearthly Prophecy, well, that'll give you the Judy conclusion. Whereas that last episode is so blatantly saying we're not going to wrap a thing up. And that always disappoints me with television series, when they set stuff up and then they don't give you an ending. And so because of that, I can't recommend it as a whole, because I think people will just be disappointed. If you watch the live action series, even though that doesn't really have any conclusions, because they got rid of the disc and they kind of got rid of that story only a couple of episodes in, there wasn't really a full story that they had to completely wrap up. They ended that as and life's just going to continue going on this way for these guys because they're no longer looking for that way out. Here, they're giving you things to look forward to in that last episode. We're going to do this. And then it just ends without them doing it. So for me, as a whole, no. But there are some episodes that I would definitely be like, but if you're not going to watch as a whole, you should definitely watch these 5 or 6 episodes because they're really good.
All right, Mark, with that, let's put an ending to this recap for the Return to the Planet of the Apes series, which I think when all is said and done, we had a good time with this, don't you think?
I did have a good time with it. Sometimes it was a better time talking about the episode than watching it. But once again, there are certain episodes in this series that I will recommend highly, and I will definitely tell people to watch. So there were just some that, but we've already discussed that to death.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy talking about them, and this was fun, and I'm glad that a listener had recommended it, because if you remember, we were originally just going to do the live-action series.
Yeah.
And I don't remember who the listener was, but there was a listener that had recommended, or actually, I believe there were a couple of listeners that asked if we were going to do the animated series, and that's when we decided to do it.
I can't believe that wasn't in the original plan. I know we just wanted to watch that live-action show to see if it recaptured what it once presented back in 1974, which was a great show, and it held up. Now, this series here, Return to the Planet of the Apes, I had never watched as a kid, and I'd said on a past episode, it just didn't hold my attention, and so I'm very, very happy we did this.
If I was being honest with you, I would say, and there are probably going to be some Planet of the Apes fans who are going to hate me for this, but I would say the reason it probably never came up in my mind was I just didn't remember there was an animated series until somebody mentioned it.
Yeah, I did, but I never had an affinity for it like I did the live action show. So it was like, we're not gonna do that, but it's Planet of the Apes on TV. We had to do it.
Right. And the listeners wanted it, and they seemed to enjoy it. We got a lot of comments on it. We got some people defending the animated series. We got some people saying they didn't like the animated series. And, all that controversy and that back and forth has been a lot of fun. So I'm glad we did it.
Right. And even though we are talking Apes TV, Mark, let's now move on to our War for the Planet of the Apes review.
He's a smart one, isn't he? What are you gonna name him?
Do they look like just apes to you?
He saved our lives.
He was remarkable.
Apes together! Strong!
You're him. You're Caesar. We've been searching for you for so long.
I did not start this war. I fight only to protect apes.
Human gets sick. Ape gets smart. Then human kill ape. But not me. I run.
There are times when it is necessary to abandon our humanity, to save humanity.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, we were going to end this episode with a very special review because you and I got to see an early screening of a film called War of the Planet of the Apes.
And let's not leave out this. We saw it at 20th Century Fox Studios, where they shot Planet of the Apes, part of the TV series and the films. So that was like, the circle is now complete.
Yeah, and we also got to see it in a great theater because we got to see it in the Zanuck Theater on the lot, which is just an amazing theater to see something like this in.
Right.
So thank you, 20th Century Fox.
And let's give a huge shout out to Tommy Shaw. She was the one that extended the invite to us. So thank you very, very much. Now, let's get into this film that we've been waiting so long for. This is set a few years after Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, and Caesar and his apes are forced into a deadly conflict with an army of humans led by a ruthless colonel, played by Woody Harrelson. After the apes suffer unimaginable loss, Caesar wrestles with his darker instincts and begins his own mythic quest to avenge his own kind. As the journey finally brings them face to face, Caesar and the Colonel are pitted against each other in an epic battle that will determine the fate of both of their species and the future of the planet. Oh, That right there just gave me chills. Because this is not just apes versus humans. This time it's personal. Hey, this is like a Jaws film. This time it's personal. You hear me, Michael Caine? This time it's personal. All right, tangent, sorry. Now, Mark, after the credits had rolled, what was your initial thought?
You know, I actually want to do this another way, because you always ask me my initial thoughts first. I want to get your initial thoughts first.
Wow, I loved it. I loved it. This was just a fantastic film, and I do recall, I don't know why, watching the film, I'm thinking I want this to be over just so I can start thinking about it, but at the same time, I don't want it to be over because it's just unfolding brilliantly, and this character of Caesar, all he wants is for peace. Leave us alone, we'll leave you alone, and we'll both continue on with our day. But the humans, they're not going to allow this, and they just keep bombarding these apes who are doing nothing but minding their own business. And I couldn't wait to see how this was going to turn out, because something does happen to make Caesar think of himself as Koba from the first two films. This was that ape that wanted nothing but dead humans on his hands. Caesar had to wrestle with himself because he didn't want to think that way. But now, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm sure this happened before, when else have we seen a hero of the film just go, you know what, screw it. I'm going to attack these people. I'm gonna avenge what just happened. Has that ever happened before?
Isn't that in every Charles Bronson movie? Or at least like the canon ones.
All right, point taken. Point taken. But I just love the fact that here was this character, the lawgiver, the one who was above it all because he had to set a standard. He had to set the peace and rules. But he's saying, you know what? I can't do that anymore. I've got some vengeance to fill. And I just love the fact that he just wasn't the wrap it up, the Superman character who just all he does is good. So we see different sides of Caesar, and not for the better.
Right. Now, I do want to clarify something, because it did kind of confuse me for a second, but since I've seen the movie, I know what you're talking about. When you're saying he's seeing himself as Koba, it's more like he's seeing the Koba inside himself.
Right.
He's just kind of reflecting back on his actions and starting to realize, oh my God, this is kind of what Koba would do.
I'm sorry if it was confusing. I was being very careful not to give anything away. But when you think Koba, what kind of character is he? And now Caesar is starting to see himself as that same character. That's not good. That's not good at all.
Right. And another thing, before I get into my opinion, I find it interesting that you're kind of hinting that maybe Caesar is the lawgiver, but I didn't see that at all. So after people see the movie, I'm going to really be interested in their interpretations, because a lot of Planet of the Apes lore is in this film. And when I say Planet of the Apes lore, I'm talking about stuff from like the original movie. There's stuff from the original movie, Charlton Heston movie, that's explained here. And they never say the word lawgiver, but there's an assumption that can be made. And you and I took very different sides on this. So it'll be interesting to see what the listeners think.
I was trying to throw that out, hoping people would kind of catch it and maybe not catch it. I didn't know you were going to highlight that.
Well, it's because I don't think that Caesar's the lawgiver, and I don't think it's a spoiler to talk about it because I don't think he's the lawgiver. I think that, other people might interpret it that way that you did, but I think that that's really up in the air, and I'm actually thinking that future stories might give us the actual lawgiver.
Okay, you know what? You're right. It's up for interpretation. That's how I interpreted it.
So trust me on this. If you guys are all thinking something was spoiled when lawgiver came up, it's not. It doesn't spoil anything at all.
No. Once again, that's my interpretation. Everyone else might think something totally different. All right, now that was my opinion, so I love the film, and wow, just fantastic. One of the two films I was really looking forward to this year, War for the Planet of the Apes and The Last Jedi. I got one checked off.
So now let me give you my opinion of the movie, and I would probably say that this is my favorite movie of the year so far.
Yeah?
This movie is so smart, the way they put everything together, that it's going to be really hard-pressed to top this movie this year. And I think that now, with this film, we might have one of the very few perfect trilogies. You wouldn't want to change anything. How many trilogies can you say that about? The original Star Wars, when it comes to Star Wars, Empire, and Return of the Jedi. The Lord of the Rings series, which the center one's a little bit weaker than the other two, but when you put them all together, it's like a really great, solid, full story. And now you got this Planet of the Apes. I'm going to call it universe, since that's the word that everybody throws out. Everybody's talking about the Marvel universe and the DC universe. Well, let's start talking about the Planet of the Apes universe. Because going from Rise to Dawn to this, you get a really great trilogy, and it's got a full story. If they end it here, and we hope that they don't, but if they were to end it here, it's a complete story, beginning, middle, and an end. It leads it so that other stories can now be explored, but it really stands on its own as a complete trilogy, the way that Star Wars, Empire, and Return of the Jedi do. The story itself is just fantastic, and I love how director Matt Reeves and his writing partner Mark Bomback aren't afraid to take this particular story to some really, really dark places. They really don't take the name of this film, War of the Planet of the Apes, lightly. I mean, at times, this film is really reminiscent of movies like Platoon and Apocalypse Now, with a little bit of maybe The Great Escape thrown in. It's got a very, very violent tone, and it's just very daring in its attempt to tell a very dark story of revenge and redemption, digging really, really deep into the characters' inner psyches. This isn't what we normally see in a summer blockbuster movie, but that's what makes it so great. It's because overall, they're not scared to really dig deep and take the film serious and give us a real serious movie where every character is written with their own story of self-discovery, and some, like Caesar, are forced to really go to some dark places within themselves to find whatever salvation they can in order to find peace in this world where things are just going all wrong.
Yeah.
But it's not just the story that's great, but it's the craftsmanship behind the film that's really great as well. The writing was spot on. It's such a character piece as opposed to, hey, let's get all the action scenes. There's plenty of actions. There's plenty of things for the people going in for the blockbuster kind of action movie to enjoy, but we get great characters. We get great new characters. The score is great. The production design is great. The cinematography was fantastic. We get great performances. We got actors who didn't walk their way through a role. They just basically said, oh, we really believe in these characters. And these are hard roles to perform. But Andy Serkis and the other actors like Steve Zahn and the others, their face isn't on screen, so they better have great vocal performances, because that's really going to, be a lot of getting these emotions across. It's just great cinema.
I don't even want to talk about the visual effects of the apes because they just look so darn real.
What visual effects?
Exactly. I'm still convinced they had done a casting all over the world. They went to the Forbidden Zone. They went to New Valley and said, hey, these are our new actors. And they may sound like Andy Serkis and Steve Zahn, but these are actual animals.
I swear I'm squinting my eyes. It looked like those apes were there.
Yeah.
They are flawless. Like in 30 years, they're still going to look flawless. I don't see how this could be a dated look because it looked like they were actually there.
Yeah, just fantastic. Even they went so far as to give all the apes close-ups.
Think about how confident a director Matt Reeves is that he knows that these are all CGI characters, but he's not scared to go into the close-up. And there's a lot of close-ups, and it works really well to get that emotion through because the CGI artists do a really good job with the facial expressions and everything, that those emotions really come through. Right now, there's a lot of talk about pushing Andy Serkis for a Best Actor Academy Award, but because of the rules of the Academy, they can't really do that. But there's a lot of people trying to push to get that changed. But I personally think that if they're going to give the award to Andy Serkis, then they also have to have the guys who did the CGI walk up there with him.
Yeah, and if he did win an award, what would it be called? An Academy Ape Award.
Oh, God.
All right, you know what? With that, you had just mentioned a little earlier about some new characters. Let's talk about this one here, Bad Ape, played by Steven Zahn. And I love Steve Zahn from That Thing You Do, and I loved him as his character called Bad Ape, because that's what he was always called at his zoo, Bad Ape. And now he's one of the only apes now that can speak.
And he says Bad Ape a lot.
Yes. But, wow, Steve Zahn plays this in a very subtle way. His line delivery, everything is just so subtle, and it's hilarious. And it comes at a good time, too, because the film's very heavy. Very, very heavy. And it needed some levity. And just when I'm starting to think that, in comes Steve Zahn with his great performance of quote-unquote Bad Ape.
Well, let me just say this about Bad Ape. And I'm going to say this about another character, too. One that I was actually worried about going into the film, and the performer just proved me wrong. And we'll get to that in a second. What's great about Bad Ape is not only does he bring a sense of humor to the film, but he could have so easily been overplayed. And Steve Zahn keeps it at the right level. He never feels over the top to me. He comes in with the humor right when he's needed, and it never feels over the top. And he could have very easily played him over the top.
I'm a big Steven Zahn fan, and I know sometimes he can be over the top, so when we first saw Bad Ape, I didn't think that was him, because he's so subtle and understated. And I just loved this character.
The thing that makes these characters so great is they're played on a realistic level. Caesar is played on such a realistic level that he feels real. We're looking at a CGI ape, but we're seeing a real character with real dimension and real motivations, even when he's kind of going off in the wrong direction emotionally, mentally, we still relate to him because we understand the motivations behind what he's doing. And Andy Serkis plays him as real, with real emotions and real feelings. Steve Zahn does the same thing here with Bad Ape. And Maurice, fantastic performance that is mostly silent throughout, because Maurice mostly communicates with sign, and just the movements, the way that he looks at things, it just feels very real.
And Maurice, he's the orangutan, just so if anyone doesn't know.
He's the big orangutan. He's become my favorite character. I know a lot of people are going to key in on Bad Ape, but I just really connect with Maurice because he's got so much real heart and emotion. And it's done mostly through silence. He basically is silent throughout most of the film. He just, like I said, signs, and we get subtitles. The character that worried me the most, though, was the Colonel, because when I found out that Woody Harrelson was cast, I like Woody Harrelson as an actor. I especially like his earlier career. I thought he made some really smart decisions when he decided to get into movies. White Men Can't Jump is one of my all-time favorite films. But we know him from so much now that I was a little worried that I was just going to see Woody Harrelson.
Yeah, me too.
But I didn't see Woody Harrelson when I was watching this, because he played his character next to perfection as well. Because here's a character that we normally get that would come off as psychotic, would come off as animated Urko, just over the top, let's just play it up completely. But Woody Harrelson doesn't play the Colonel that way. And for people who aren't familiar with the characters, the Colonel is actually the bad guy. He's the villain of the story. And Woody Harrelson plays him in a very even keel. Like, if he had gone one step further, it would have been too much. If he had paid it one step less, it wouldn't have been enough. He finds that perfect spot that it just works so well. And what's so great about his character is also the way it's written, because he's kind of written as somebody who we're supposed to think of as slightly mad. He's thinking all this stuff's going to happen, but because we've seen the original Planet of the Apes movie with Charlton Heston, we start to realize, is he mad, or is he just the only person who sees the truth? Mm-hmm. And it's driving him crazy that nobody else sees it. There's these levels to him that are just fascinating, and Woody Harrelson pulls it off so well.
He's almost like a younger version of Marlon Brando from Apocalypse Now.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. A lot of people are comparing him to that.
I can definitely see that.
I have one last question for you.
Okay.
Generally, when you're watching a movie where there are creatures, monsters, or just about anything else opposing the human race, well, you generally root for the humans. You basically don't want to see the human race wiped out by another species. So I want to know how you felt about the fact that while watching this film, you're actually rooting for the apes to beat out the humans. Think about it. If you were a human in this world, you wouldn't want that to happen. Yet here we are, a human audience, and all the way through this film, we're rooting for the apes as they face off against our own species.
You know what? When I go to the movies and I see someone texting, and I'm thinking, you know what? I could deal with some apes right now, because apes wouldn't be texting during a movie. I'm just saying, okay? Maybe apes have better manners and etiquette than humans, so if it were to come about to that, you know what? I'm fine with that.
I just thought that it was really fascinating for them to set it up that way.
All Caesar wants is peace. Leave us alone, we'll leave you alone, that's it. And the humans come in and attack the apes. So how you can't root for the humans.
No, you can't, but that's my point.
Oh, I get your point. I get your point.
I just found it fascinating because that's a really daring choice, a really daring direction to go in. Because the only way that this can go in the direction we're rooting for is if we get the Planet of the Apes. And as human beings, we should probably not want our race wiped out. But the filmmakers here, they actually effectively get us rooting for the apes in every turn. And because it was so effective, I found that incredibly fascinating.
Now, we're hoping we're getting all you ape fans excited for this film. If you haven't already seen it, get out there and see it before anyone spoils anything, because there's a lot of twists and turns that you don't want spoiled, because when you see them, your jaw just drops. All right, Mark, with that, we have to conclude this episode of Talking Apes TV. Once again, we did it, Mark. We did it. We reviewed and recapped the whole live-action series, now the animated show, Return to Planet of the Apes, and now we're going to go on a small hiatus, but we can't go on until we thank everybody. We gotta thank all the apes for coming back, listening to every show, and writing us such great critiques and responses and questions. We want to thank everyone for that. We want to thank Angela Rushmere, who's been doing such a great job on the Facebook page, posting pictures. I'm not sure where she finds these pictures, but they're great, these videos. Thank you very much, Angela, for all of that. We want to thank Rob Dellinger, who composed all of the original jingles you hear on Talking Apes TV. And please, go ahead and check out Rob Dellinger's website. That's Rob, R-O-B, Dellinger, DEHLINGER.com. And I also want to thank my sweetie wife, Sarah, who does all the technical work on Talking Apes TV. She posts the show, she lets us know when something comes up on social media that we should know about, and does all of the graphic design work. Thank you to my sweetie wife. Now, if you want to contact us about anything about this show or just the series in general, we'd love to hear from you. We're going to keep our email addresses open, the Twitter handle open. Email us at apestv@skywalkingthroughneverland.com. You can tweet at us at Talking Apes TV. And like you've been saying, Mark, the Facebook page, facebook.com/Talking Apes TV. And if you haven't already joined me and my sweetie wife, Sarah, on our Star Wars Disney podcast, Skywalking Through Neverland, go ahead and do that at skywalkingthroughneverland.com and on retrozap.com. So, Mark, before we officially say our goodbyes, anything else you want to say?
If I don't say a goodbye or anything like that, does that mean the episode never ends and the show will go on forever?
Unfortunately not.
All right. No, I just want to say thank you to everybody who listened, and especially all the listeners who did more than listen. They were very active on Facebook, posting pictures, giving us comments, confirming information when we were right, correcting us when we were wrong, and just being really active on Facebook as a community. Let's keep the community going.
Oh, and we will. So, until next time, when we can get Felix Silla on the show, or any other time, this is Richard.
This is Mark.
And thank you to all the apes, and you will definitely hear from us again. Now go ape!
Thank you once again for listening to Talking Apes TV. You can help support Talking Apes TV by posting about us on Facebook, Twitter, or just tell another Planet of the Apes fan. We would also appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes. A link to our iTunes page can be found at skywalkingthroughneverland.com. Talking Apes TV was created by Richard Wolosky and Mark Agushowitz, with graphic design by Sarah Wolosky. Talking Apes TV is not affiliated with 20th Century Fox or the CBS network, and all names, sounds, or related items of Planet of the Apes are registered trademark and copyright 20th Century Fox, and the respected trademark and copyright holders. All rights reserved. Talking Apes TV is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. All the original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Hey Hey Entertainment, copyright 2017. All rights reserved. No part of this show may be repurposed, reproduced, redistributed, or rebroadcast without the written consent of Hey Hey Entertainment.